When it comes to self-development, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and claim the potential inside of you, you're in the right place. Welcome back to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schechter. As an integrative specialist and breathwork facilitator, I'm invested in making the dynamic landscape of personal evolution accessible. My goal is to inspire you to take action for yourself. You have the capacity to evolve and bring your intentions and dreams into the world. There's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to transform your life and share the stories of practitioners who are doing the work so that you feel inspired to go and practice, because that's the vital point. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star review. It's an easy, free way to support the show and help more people discover these simple, life-changing practices. My guest on today's show is Shannon Duncan. He's an entrepreneur and author of the landmark book, Present Moment Awareness. And in his newest book, Coming Full Circle, Duncan shares what he learned during his own intensive multi-year process of healing trauma with the help of psychedelics. An advocate for those seeking to heal from trauma, it is his sincere wish that sharing what he's learned through his experiences will be of service to those who are in need. And having read the book, I can say that there's never been a better time for this coming full circle, healing trauma using psychedelics to come out. There's so many people that are looking to psychedelic medicines, to the blossoming psychedelic renaissance for help with a myriad of different conditions: depression, anxiety, PTSD, addiction, maybe just self-discovery and self-exploration. And this book is full of very useful information to help cut through the noise. You know, it's one of the things that we talk about during the episode is that there's a lot of noise, and often the people making the most noise aren't necessarily the most qualified. And so it takes discernment to figure out what's the best way to work with these medicines and how to find a qualified guide to support you in your work. So that's one of the things that we get into is, you know, things you should consider when you're looking for a guide, what the guide actually needs to be doing, the difference between a trip sitter and, a psychedelic guide that's supporting you in doing trauma work and other deep medicine work, the importance of setting, surrender, intention, the importance of having some sort of somatic practices, and as well as the natural ebb and flow of the integration process, that it's not always a linear path forward to growth. There are advances and contractions. You know, there's a natural cycle to this, and you know, there's so much that you can learn, so much that you can get into, and coming full circle really condenses a lot of the useful information down into one volume that you can use to help get more out of your psychedelic work. Before we jump into the interview, I'd like to share one other thing that's been really helpful in my own psychedelic integration, and we talk a little bit about it during the episode, and that's breathwork. Breathwork is one of the most important resources for doing deep inner work, shadow work, inner child work, psychedelic work, and indeed getting in touch with that somatic experience in your life. So are you ready to take the next step on your path of self-care? If so, I invite you to schedule a free consultation call with me at calendly.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. Again, that's calendly.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we were talking about your first book right before I hit record, Present Moment Awareness, and the importance of cultivating that in your life. So before we jump into the conversation, I wonder if we could just do a quick mindfulness practice just to help not only you and I arrive, but the audience that's joining us and listening
Sure.
as well. So if you're in a place where it's safe to do so and it feels right, go ahead and close your eyes. It's not required, but it might help you just drop in a little bit. And then just begin to bring your awareness to your breathing. You might want to ask yourself, how do I know that I'm breathing right now? And wherever you find the answer to that question, just allow your awareness just to rest there. Keeping in mind that the sensation of breath can be an anchor that you come back to again and again if you find the mind wandering. And just allowing your breath to get a little bit deeper, a little bit slower. And now just checking in with the body. Notice where you feel support at this moment. That might be the sensation of your feet on the ground or your body where it connects to a chair or a couch, maybe your car seat. And just becoming curious if there's any other sensations in the body at this moment that are asking for your attention. If there's any points that feel like they might need a little breath, just breathe in to loosen, to soften, to relax a little bit more. And then when you feel ready, allowing your eyes to open slowly if they've been closed. And again, if it's safe for you, just allow the eyes to wander for a moment, letting them go where they want to go. Allowing yourself just to take in the external space, noticing any sounds, any other sensations. Just taking a moment to get curious about how you're feeling in this space, in this moment. And we'll come full circle back to the conversation. So, Shannon, welcome. All right. It was funny. I was a guest on a podcast the other night, and I talked for about an hour, and I felt like I was in this really excited podcast mode, talking about my passions, and I didn't really realize that I was in that mode until the very end. The guest asked, "Well, could you do like maybe a quick practice to let us know what it's like to work with you?" And I went from this really like high energy, like I'm really excited to talk about breath work, down into this, sort of facilitator mode. And I was like, oh wow, this is different. So I'm trying to bring more of that energy into the podcast experience. So coming full circle, what really inspired you to write this book?
That's a great question. It came about largely due to the amount of true growth I was able to experience within myself. I had done years of different kinds of therapies. I had experimented with psychedelics on my own, for inner exploration and personal growth. And it's when I encountered working with a truly qualified guide, somebody who sits with you and helps hold space for and shape the experience that you're having, that everything started to change for me. And I talk about it quite a bit in the book. And as I went through this process over time, because I went deep with it, and I still continue to go deep with it. I realized that there's a lot of people getting excited about psychedelics as a potential for healing, and I also started to see the development of these, put it in air quotes, psychedelic healing communities, and just people coming out of the woodwork, finding that, oh, this is my new purpose in life. This is what I need to do. And I really started seeing how radically unqualified they were to offer this. People that had never actually gone deep in themselves. They'd had big psychedelic experiences, but they had never gone deep. And there's a profound difference in the two. And deep doesn't mean necessarily big doses. Deep doesn't mean anything other than you internally are giving permission for it to go, not into your head for big insights, but deep into your body, into the emotional body, into the somatic experience of emotion and perception, and to facilitate changes there. And so, a lot of the unqualified people are kind of yip the loudest on social media, as they're the ones that promote themselves the hardest. And to me, they're not just dangerous, but they're also potentially robbing people of their opportunity to potentially heal for real. Not just typical self-help, giving a lot of lip service to how it changed my life, and then they just go right back to how they were, but actually deep fundamental changes in how your human mechanism works. And so I wrote Coming Full Circle to help people have a realistic understanding of what this can look like, what it really takes, the mindset that it takes, the understanding within yourself that it takes, and also how to help identify the people who are actually qualified to hold space for this versus the many, many, many people out there that very confidently say they can hold space for this, but they really can't. Not safely, not in an effective way. And so it's really there to help the people that are sincerely looking for help on how to get it.
Yeah, and I think it's coming at a great time. I really enjoyed the book, that not only for the information that was there, but again, like you're saying, these medicines are coming more into the mainstream now in such a big way. And, for me, like, who grew up, in school, they were taking us through the DARE program, and it was like, say no to drugs and things like that. And I've often reflected that it must be really strange for folks that aren't as versed in the psychedelic world as maybe you or I, with sort of the programming or propaganda that they grew up with,
Yeah.
versus hearing these sound bites and things that are probably taken out of context a lot, or they see a post that randomly comes up on social media that basically contradicts that propaganda and that programming. And
Yeah.
I would imagine that it's a very strange place to be, to sort of navigate those waters.
It's, there was a lot of really unfortunate propaganda that came out of the war on drugs, that came out of the Just Say No programs, the DARE programs. It's, I mean, granted, there are real issues with people addicted to fentanyl, addicted to opioids, and all of these drugs need to be approached with a seriousness and an understanding of them, I think. But psychedelics sit in a different place than opioids, than cocaine, than there's this talk on social media, which I avoid social media as much as humanly possible. I don't have any personal accounts anywhere. I haven't for over 15 years, and I really only got back on for promoting the book, just because I was told I had to.
Right.
And I promptly hired somebody to do most of that for me, because it's just too much. But I derailed my train of thought a little bit there. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
But it's important to realize that, you know, psychedelics can be used recreationally, which, you know, if done responsibly, can be an amazing experience. It's a really amazing experience, but it can also be profoundly helpful. You can get, you know, when you do psychedelics, I assume you've tried psychedelics. Almost always you get these powerful insights or these helpful insights. You get for people who haven't done it, you get these flashes of understanding where you see yourself or your life or some aspect of your life from a different perspective. You know, maybe you've been in conflict with your significant other, or, you know, you're just miserable at work or whatever it is, and all of a sudden you just see it from this point of increased clarity where you're like, oh my God, how did I never see this before? And so you can bring that back with you, and in the sober light of day, consider it, and then maybe that will inform life changes you can take that will be helpful. And people use them expansively, which is often interchangeable with spiritually. And so it's, you know, a lot of psychedelic retreats are these expansive experiences where you go and you get together, and it's somebody's leading the thing, and you get to have these expansive experiences, but are more focused, and so you get more clarity on yourself. You go deeper. A lot of people will grow or change their relationship to whatever their sense of a higher power is. And then there's also what I call medicine work, this deeper work you can do where you can take it much deeper, and you can go into the places that are scary or the places that feel shameful, and you bring light and air into those shadow areas, and that's where the real deep fundamental changes come from. And that's why I think psychedelics need to be held differently than the class of drugs that, you know, when used recreationally, are really only about the addiction, cocaine. And it's not for me to decide, this is just my opinion, but cocaine and opioids and those kinds of drugs that tend to get abused, and when they're abused, they tend to degrade a person's life. And psychedelics aren't that. Psychedelics can be abused, but it's not the same. And most people find that the experiences are big enough that they tend to self-regulate how often they go dipping their toes in those waters, right? You're not called back to it in the same way. And so that's where I think the shame of the war on drugs and all the propaganda, just lumping these things all together as one thing, has really given a very negative connotation to something that can be very positive when approached educated and responsibly.
Yeah, great answer. And I'm really glad that you went into that. That was one of the questions that I had, because you do go into the difference between recreational, expansive, and medicine work in the book. And you know, it's something that I'm always reminding people of is, you know, we're kind of conditioned to think about a medicine as, you know, like a pill or something that you're taking that has a particular effect. Like if I needed to, you know, if I have diabetes and I'm going to take this, you know, medicine and it's going to do something to my blood sugar, my insulin, or, you know, I have the flu and I'm taking something to get rid of my cough, or, you know, the body aches, things like that. And I'm always reminding them that that's not really what psychedelics do at all. They're just they're gonna shine a light on the things that feel out of whack, out of balance, the traumas that we're holding on to that maybe we're not even aware of on a conscious level.
Yeah.
But then most of the healing is coming from actually working with that material, not just the medicine's not just like, you know, sweep it away in the way that, you know, that, you know, cough suppressant might. But I also appreciated that, you know, I really identified with one of the things that you said during this part of the book, which was that even the recreational experiences that you had often went in this spiritual, expansive kind of direction.
Yeah.
And that's something that I found as well. You know, I mean, certainly I've had experiences that are, you know, just fun and, you know, laughing and giggling or dancing and, you know, just having a good time. But oftentimes I felt like the medicine was taking me in this direction of deeper work or a more spiritual outcome, or to me, I think guiding me towards ultimately that medicine work and that more intentional, experience where there was somebody there taking care of me and I was able to, integrate and get more transformation out of the experience. So I'm glad that I'm not the only one that, kind of had that sort of experience myself. Um, yeah. So Um, let's talk a little bit about something you already mentioned, which was the working with guides. I thought one of the greatest parts of the book was this section about the qualifications for guides and the things that you should be asking yourself if you're interested in doing this deeper medicine work and you're looking for the right person to support you on that. So can you talk about what are some of the questions that are important to ask when you're doing that inquiry?
Yeah, so for somebody who's just setting out on this, there's some legal outlets for working with psychedelics. There's legally sanctioned clinical trials like the ones that MAPS puts out. The MAPS organization's kind of been spearheading, legalizing, using the medicines in this way, mostly MDMA. I think they might be working with mushrooms as well. I'm not certain on that. And while I'm really on board with it's got to start somewhere and it's got to come in at a rate that the existing establishment can understand, but from what I've seen of some of the ways that those sessions are held, I think that they would be minimally helpful. I think for somebody just new to it, it could be really helpful. I've heard that some people have gotten really good help from it. But there's big limitations on what the therapists are allowed to do. There's a lack of understanding in the kind of setup and space that needs to be allowed for somebody to have a real experience. And so, that's one avenue for getting that kind of help. And you'll be working with a licensed therapist that may or may not have had any actual experience on psychedelics themselves. It's not a prerequisite to be a MAPS therapist. Which I think is shameful. And then there's, like in Oregon, they've decriminalized mushrooms. And so there are centers popping up that offer, legal mushroom experiences. But the people that are being trained to offer those experiences also are not required to have an extensive background in working with mushrooms themselves. They're not required to have done any real deep work. They're just required to have paid a lot of money to go to these weekend courses for a few months. And does that mean that no good guides will come out of those programs and be offering these really expensive sessions in Oregon? I don't know. It's more is necessary. Most of the really good help that I know of is in the underground. It's the stuff that's been around for decades before any of this became, brought into the collective social awareness, especially on social media. And so in the underground, anybody can say that they offer this stuff, and anybody does. And that's what I really talk about in the book is there's this great analogy of that it was shared with me and that I shared in the book of, imagine if you had this deep tooth pain for a long time and you finally went to an oral surgeon and you got a root canal and all of a sudden it felt better and you're just like, oh my God, so many other people must be in pain. And so you order some used dental equipment off of eBay and watch some YouTube videos and start offering root canals. And it's like, well, I've experienced this, and so I know everything there is to know about it, and so I'm going to share this with others. And that's really similar to what's happening with psychedelics. People go to Burning Man, or they go and have some big drug experiences, or they went to a weekend retreat in Costa Rica and they had some big experiences. And there's this phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where somebody that has a little bit of knowledge about something assumes that what they know is all there is to know, and so they assume themselves to be an expert. And so you get a lot of these, in air quotes, experts out in the psychedelic healing world now. And if they're charismatic enough and attractive enough often, they'll start attracting people to come and let them sit with them. And those are the guys that are leaving. If they're not outright dangerous up front, which some of them definitely are. A lot of predators have come out of the woodwork, and a lot of sexual abuse has happened in those circumstances. But if they're not outright dangerous, they don't realize, and their clients don't realize, how much potential for healing is lost. If you've never done psychedelics before, or you've only done them recreationally, and you go and you're in a quiet room with some music playing and hear somebody sitting quietly next to you and you're wearing an eye shade, something interesting is going to happen, and it's likely going to feel really profound. But that doesn't mean it's anywhere near what's actually possible for you if you're sitting with somebody that's done their own deep work and that are educated in how to do this work, because they hold a different energy, they hold a different space. And so what's possible for you to open into is radically different than if you're sitting with somebody who, even though they're sitting there quietly, they're triggered by what's moving in you. And that's really the point of that section in the book, is to help people understand what qualified guidance looks like.
Yeah, I was recently talking with Daniel McQueen of Medicinal Mindfulness, and he said, so if you were having a trip and the medicine told you that you should become a lawyer, it doesn't mean that you like pop out of the ceremony and go into a courtroom. You still have to like go to school and pass the bar, or just like, similar to what you're saying, like, if the medicine says go be a doctor, it doesn't mean that you get to start practicing medicine. Yeah. And to take it a step further, I like the analogy, just, this is from my own experience of, a long time ago, I worked in the insurance industry, and, someone would come to me and say, well, I've been with your agency for 10 years and, I've always been happy with the service, but this guy down the street says he's going to give me, $100 off my premium for a year. So why should I stick with you? And I would say, well, the unfortunate thing about insurance is that you're not going to know how good or bad it is until something goes wrong. You might pay your premium for 10 years and nothing bad happens, but it's when you actually need it that you're going to figure out, is this good or bad, right? So just like you're saying, you might have a guide, and we're using that in air quotes, that can sit there, and maybe get you water, or, sort of keep you company while you have an eye mask on, and, you're on this inner journey, and maybe nothing goes bad. And so you're like, oh, okay, they must be a good guide. But it's in those moments where that deep trauma or those deep emotions come up that you're going to see, can this person actually hold space? Are they able to support?
Or where you share something that for them is unhealed in them. That's a really common one. Maybe you share something of an abuse that happened to you, or something you've done that you felt ashamed about from years ago, or something like that. And if that other person gets triggered, even if they don't say something out loud, if you feel them tense, you feel them go quiet, even with an eye mask on, you feel it. And it's that unhealed wounding in the other person that is the most problematic in holding this space. I mean, a lot of these people calling themselves healing guides and medicine guides and whatever would probably make fine trip sitters. A trip sitter is somebody that just sits with you while you trip out to make sure you don't jump out a window or start calling your ex-wife to ask her to get back together, or, whatever the ridiculous things is that people do when they're on, they just kind of help hold a safe space for you. But that is not even a close approximation to what being a true medicine guide is. And far too many have no idea. And that was one of the big reasons that I wanted to put that whole big chapter in Coming Full Circle, is just because it's so important to understand.
Yeah, and like you're saying, or you're definitely touching on it, is like when you're in that expanded state of consciousness, you or whoever is sitting is so much more open and receptive to very subtle energies. Like you're going to pick up on that reaction even with the eye mask. you're
or
going to feel it in the field.
it's like the temperature in the room changes. You feel this shift
Right.
happening. It's like everything just quiets down or clamps down, or you can just you always feel if your guide has an emotion or an opinion about something, even if they don't voice it. It's just always in the room with you. And if you're not consciously aware of it, it can put up a wall to where you'll allow yourself to go. And that's how it
Right.
shortchanges what's possible for you.
Yes.
I've worked with people that have just come right out and tried explaining back to me what it was I was going through, because I tend to be very verbal in my own work, and that's just the absolute wrong thing to do. That's a rookie thing to do, because you're not there. The guide isn't there to play therapist with you and tell you what your answers are and tell you how you should think about things or how you should process it or that you should let it go. Or no, those are all amateur things to do. A guide's there to let you unfold in however you need to unfold. And if you do have questions, usually they come back with really good questions in return, not answers for you.
Yeah.
My current guide that I've been working with in the last several years, when I voice something that I'm feeling bad about or that's very, very old and shameful, her whole thing is normalizing. She always normalizes, like, I work with a lot of people that have these kind of experiences, and this is a really normal thing to feel. And when it doesn't just feel like something bad about me or weird about me, it gives space for it to open and release. And so instead of trying to be insightful and give me advice, she's just telling me her experience and working with other people with similar things, and it's super helpful. But if she wasn't a deeply experienced licensed therapist that is highly trained and experienced in working with trauma and has done her own deep work around trauma, she wouldn't know to do that. She wouldn't know how important that is. And that's really the crux of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the things that I appreciate the most about the holotropic breathwork sort of paradigm and training is it's drilled into you again and again that you're not the healer. You're there to hold the space.
Yeah.
And, even the way that Tav Sparks put it is that doing, not doing. As soon as you start to do something, you're taking away from that breather's experience and their process.
Yeah.
And you're actually arresting it right in that moment.
Yeah.
Rather than allowing them to actually process. So one of the books that I always recommend kind of on this topic is Kylie Taylor's book, The Ethics of Caring, because it's literally a book about how, working with people that are in expanded states of consciousness, whether that's acupuncture and body work, breath work, and even up to psychedelics, because of the amount of projection and transference and countertransference that's happening, not just from the breather or the participant, but you as the space holder as well. And like why it's so important to do your own work so that you can actually be that empty vessel and hold space for somebody else.
I'll have to check out that book. It sounds perfect.
Yeah. It's a really, really great book. So like let's keep talking about sort of getting ready for those psychedelic experiences. You talk a lot about the importance of set and setting and intention and surrender. So those are, I don't know, I guess we could just kind of go in any kind of place from there, because those are all really important sort of points
Sure.
for people to think about.
We talked a little bit about the different kinds of, and those are loose boxes, right? And things overflow each other, and somebody else
Yeah.
might box them up different than I did. That's just how I came to it. But we talk about, with recreational and expansive spiritual use of psychedelics, they tend to be really positive experiences. It tends to be, very much maybe heart and shoulders up kind of. It's a lot in your head. It's a lot about understanding. It's a lot about insight. Sometimes challenging emotions come up, but you breathe through it. You keep breathing, and sometimes you remind yourself you're on a drug and it'll wear off, and that helps you to keep calm, or somebody's there to help you stay calm and you breathe through it. And so you can have those kinds of challenging experiences. But with deep medicine work, I've used this idea before, but it's like you find that there's this door in you, And it goes down to the basement where there's dark shadows and where the scary stuff lives and where the shameful stuff lives. And, in those more common psychedelic experiences, this door stays closed. Maybe it cracks open and a little something seeps out once in a while. And that's where the idea of bad trips come from, because something really scary comes up and you don't know how to handle it. There's lots and lots of emotion. But bad trips are just one way of looking at it. It's really an opportunity to process those very challenging emotions. And with deep medicine work, you're choosing to open this door, and that's a strong part of your intention setting. And that's why doing somatic body work, you can feel in your body where you're holding on to old pain. You can feel in your body where you feel fear, and that's where your intentions need to come from. They're on the other side of that door. And so with deep medicine work, you go into it knowing you're going down here. You're going into the subterranean levels. You're going into what Jung would have called the shadow realms, down into the areas that are hidden away or disavowed from your psyche. And that's where the true deep healing happens. That's where things really start to change. And so, being aware of this, before going into doing psychedelic medicine work, doing somatic types of therapy like haikomi or somatic body experiencing. There are others that people find. Internal family systems I've heard really good things about, but I've never worked with that one. Haikomi was mine, and I've done a little bit of somatic body experiencing, but it puts you in touch with how your emotions live in your body and how to identify them and how to observe them. And that is a great way to prepare yourself, not only to be able to open that door and allow your attention to go down into your body and to allow those things to shift and change and move and release, but it empowers you to know that you can do it and you survive it, because we have very strong defense mechanisms keeping that door closed. Most people don't venture past that door sometimes in their entire lives. But this is where true growth happens. This is where things really change. So even when life gets hard later, you're not just instantly reverting back to what you always did before, as happens when you're just working with insights. But it's just deep fundamental changes in your operating system. So, preparing yourself in that way, preparing yourself and just getting comfortable with sitting with discomfort is a really big one. When you start feeling angry, when you start feeling triggered, when you start feeling sad, to be able to sit and breathe and just feel it and allow it to open and expand and not instantly need to get away from it is a powerful training tool for getting ready for psychedelic work. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah,
I start
for
wandering
sure.
sometimes. So
No, it's all good.
and you had spoken about set and setting, and set and setting for a psychedelic experience. If you're doing trip sitting, or if you're doing like a psychedelic retreat, or you're just hanging out with friends doing some stuff, you want a place that's safe. It's not going to have a lot of intrusions that could be upsetting for the people there. It's a way to hold it all together. But for deep medicine work, one is you need a place that's very, very private. A lot of times the legalized psychedelic therapy happens in therapist's office. So there's this implicit understanding that you're not going to be too loud because there's a dentist office right on the opposite side of the wall, or there's people walking around in the hallway outside. And so when you put those kind of restraints on your experience, you're reining in what's possible. Because sometimes when you're doing emotional release, you need to be able to cry or be loud. Sometimes you scream, sometimes you swear, sometimes you're just talking, sometimes you have no idea what you're saying. And it's all good because it's all this release. It's this unwinding of intense emotional energy, and it has to come out some way. Another big mistake I often see with the clinical settings is they put people in a recliner or a zero gravity chair, or they put them on a sofa and they've got headphones on. You can't move. I can't tell you how much in deep medicine work, even in my own personal experience of deep medicine work, it's a lot of thrashing around. It's a lot of movement. Your head's moving, your arm's moving, you're flipping over, you're doing whatever. And as long as, your guide is there to keep you safely kind of on the mat. I'm usually on like this queen size mat on the floor, can't run into anything. And so you can move freely. And if you don't have that freedom of movement and the freedom to be as loud as you need to be, you're really restraining what's possible in the work. And some people go through their medicine work and they're completely quiet. And that is just never, ever one time been the case for me. It's just, it's just this stuff gets uncorked and it just moves through my body and in whatever way it needs to. And that's where the
Yeah.
real benefit comes from. That's how the releasing comes from. And so that's the setting for the room is it's private and it's quiet. There's not intrusive sound from the outside. There's no concern that someone on the outside is going to hear you. You have the freedom to move, this knowledge. The more that you genuinely feel safe, both with your guide, you trust your guide and you feel safe with them, but you also feel safe in the environment. The more you're going to be able to let that work go deep.
Yeah. Yeah. The part of that movement is the release, is one way that that energy releases, like you're saying. So it is so important. And again, I'm drawing parallels to the breathwork experience.
Oh, yeah,
And, just, like the two of the things that I'm always encouraging people to do within that container is express themselves through sound, like even if it's not an audible, like just toning or just whatever, and that's just a way to move it, and then let themselves move. Like if the body starts to feel like moving, don't suppress it, just allow it to move through.
Yeah, the expression of that deep emotional material can come out in movement and sound. Sometimes it's weird belching, it just start.
Uh-huh.
It's just like weird
Right.
belching. Sometimes it's purging, it's actually vomiting.
Right.
And I talk to people about that and I watch their eyes go wide and it's like, look, it's not like having the flu. It's not like you have this buildup and this dread and you're just like, oh my God, I just need to get really still and try to avoid it. It just kind of comes up and it happens and your guide's paying attention. So they give you a bucket and it
Right.
comes out and it's over and it feels great when it's over. And it's not like purging when you're sick. It's just not. It just happens and it needs to happen and there's no need to fight it and you just let it out. And so sometimes it's weird temperature changes, like I'll get super, super hot or really, really cold. My body just does all kinds of weird things as it's processing these things, as it's resisting and releasing, resisting and releasing. It's just all sorts of stuff happens. And the more you're just open to let it do what it needs to do, the more you can get from the work.
Right. The more you can just trust the process and go with whatever's happening, the better off it is. As soon as we start to question or have resistance, then we're kind of taking ourselves out of the actual process and experience.
Yeah, and being up in your head, I'm somebody that's always been up in my head my whole life. I just tend to get up here and process a lot. And the more I'm not in my head during the medicine work, the better, because now I'm not trying to figure out, well, what does this mean? And how does this fit into the puzzle pieces of my life? And, just that mechanism, that puzzle solver that is my brain or my mind, the more that's just kind of out and I'm just in my body and allowing it to do what it needs to do. And I should be clear that, especially with my recent guide I work with that I just adore, it took 3 or 4 sessions for the trust to really be built that I could just let it all hang out. Just whatever needs to happen, whatever words or sounds or whatever. And she has just been so completely non-judgmental, not internally. I never feel from her a pullback, based on something I've said. And I've projected things onto her. I've projected anger. She wore the mom face for a little bit, and I just thought she was trying to undermine me. And I've had amorous feelings come up, and she's just handled that really well. And I was not shamed for it. I wasn't. She just set clear boundaries and just really helped refocus. And if I would have come back into my head, I would have restrained all of that. But just getting out of the way and just letting that happen. And she's just handled it beautifully. And it's just really a testament to how being deeply experienced and really understanding this process is so important, because somebody else might get offended or they might shame the person for whatever, and it's so damaging when you're that open, when you're that vulnerable.
Sure. Yeah. And it also kind of speaks to the importance of not only of doing your own work as a guide, but like, we sort of touched on it that, and I'm always curious about this, to talk with people about it, is like how oftentimes when we have our own big peak experiences, or, these big sort of revelations doing our own medicine work, there's like this desire or this tendency to come out of it and think, oh, I should be working with medicine, or like I should be serving the medicine. And, like that's, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
And you're choosing a very challenging path if that's the road that you want to take. And there's a lot of work that needs to happen so that you can hold space in a good, ethical, supportive way. And it's not something that you're probably going to be doing like full time, because the emotional and spiritual kind of toll that it takes, it's a lot, right? It's
Yeah.
not, you're not just sitting in a room. Like you said, there's a big difference between trip sitting and guiding and actually supporting somebody in deep work.
That's the slippery slope of it, though, is because people have these big, what to them feels like this big revolutionary experience, right?
Right.
And they love to, I hear so many people on social media, and they've written their book, and and then they go on podcasts, and go, and it changed my life, and it's just like,
Yeah.
did it? Did it really? Because it seems like you're just speaking from your head, and you're not really, you're not coming from a deep place when you talk about this. You're kind of manipulating how people view you, so they'll take you seriously, so you can do more of this. But people have these big experience, what feels to them like a big experience, and they think, oh, this is 100%, I have done what this is, and they don't realize, well, you've done something amazing, and that's great, and I'm glad you got something good from it, but you've done 10% of what's possible, not 100% of what's possible. But that's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? They think that what they
Right.
know is everything. And so now they're qualified, and so they don't think, well, now I need to go and get some psychotherapeutic training. Even if I don't become a licensed therapist, there's a lot I need to know, and I should probably maybe go do some somatic body experience training, or maybe some Haikomi training, so I can learn about that. And I should really double down on doing my own work, because clearly I need to find out how deep this can go so I can hold that space for other people. They don't think that. They think, oh,
Right.
now I'm qualified. And so they'll talk a friend or a cousin or whoever to let them sit with them. And, the person puts on their eye shades, and they have a psychedelic experience, and they come in and they go, oh my God, that was wonderful. Thank you. And everybody wants to thank their guide when they come out of these things. And so the person's thinking, oh yeah, I'm really good at this. This is my purpose in life now. This is the meaning I've been looking for. And they don't realize that you held a 10% space for this person, and if they would have had an 80% space or 100% space, they could have opened up into something much more. But they don't realize it, because the person sitting with them, or the sat for, doesn't realize it, and so they just perpetuates this misunderstanding. And that's
Yeah.
why there are so many unqualified guides out there, is they get such a boost to their self-esteem from it. And they don't realize that boost of their self-esteem is really costing other people their opportunity to grow.
Yeah. Dude, I had such a bigger ego death than you. Like, you don't even believe it. Yeah. And there's this other aspect that you touched on earlier of the fact that, it can be dangerous when people are that charismatic, because the participant that they're working with is in this open, very malleable kind of space.
Yeah, a lot of dogma comes into
it's
play. I've spoken to people that have had psychedelic guides shaming them for not being vegan while they're in the space, shaming them for their political
wow.
ideologies in the space. I saw some knucklehead on social media, this guy that's always promoting himself, and he said something about psychedelics don't kill. He makes his own little memes, right? And psychedelics don't kill people, people kill people. And then he goes, well, if the other side can use that, then I guess we can too. And I'm like, what other side? Psychedelics aren't for liberals versus conservatives, and a great many conservative veterans are getting huge benefit from coming in and getting treatment. And I'm just like, that kind of just narrow-minded divisiveness is an absolute indicator that this person has no ability, he has no place working with medicines in this way. That kind of thinking, but yet he is one of the louder voices on LinkedIn. I mean, he's always posting up memes and talking about, I don't do the healing, I am the sutures that hold the wound closed so this other person can heal. And I'm just like, no, you're not any of that. You're just there to hold the space, man. But it's really baffling to me. And I try not to read social media too much because I just get so frustrated. It's just like, it's a mess out there. and me doing these podcasts, talking about what I do in the book is just really a hope that it'll help educate people to the point where they can avoid guys like that.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned the somatic work. You talk a little bit about Hakomi in the book, and I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner myself.
Yeah.
And I just, if I can go back to one thing you said, just to give a plug, like I think IFS, internal family systems, and somatic work go so hand in hand. Like they're so good together. Because, one of the things you mentioned in the book is getting in touch with not only a sensation, but like, is there a color? Is there a shape? Is there a tactile sense? Like what are the different aspects of that somatic sensation? And I found with IFS, that just becomes like another aspect of your somatic experience. It's like, oh, wait, what part is this? And when I started to get that sense of not only like, oh, this has a color, this has a shape, there's, I can feel the boundaries of it, things like that. But like, oh, wait, the trauma that I've been carrying as a, 4-year-old that, whose parents got divorced is different than like, say, the 13-year-old that, got physically assaulted. Like that was a huge game changer for me as far as like being able to go a level deeper and work with those sensations and that trauma. So definitely give a shout out to IFS.
Yeah, I've heard great things about it. At the point where I was introduced to it, I already had a really powerful relationship formed with my own inner world, and I view them as younger aspects of myself that are wounded and kind of locked away. It's just a way of relating to it, right? It's just a way of kind of making sense of it, but not trying to get too in the head about it, just really giving it the more it can be observed, the more it can open and expand and release. But I've heard just really good things about IFS, and I even mentioned it in the book I meant to, as something that's really powerful to explore if that calls to someone.
Yeah. Isn't that really interesting that like a lot of different modalities are really saying the same thing? It's just maybe from a different reference or a different frame, but, or using different language.
Yeah.
But
you find the one that works
there's
for
so
you,
much
right?
overlap. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the thing about the body-centered therapies is, I'm sure you've read The Body Keeps the Score. And that is for anyone that's wanting to understand their own trauma. You can read that book, or the audiobook is really, really good. But The Body Keeps the Score really brings home how trauma is stored in the body, and trying to intellectualize your way into an understanding of it can often really get in the way. And so by being able to give expression to those parts as they're held in the body, as they'll each have their own words, their own expression. It opens up the picture, and the understanding comes, but it gives them the chance to shift and move, where normally they've been kind of packed down into bedrock, right? And they've been locked away, and then they don't move. And it's just a powerful way to approach. And then having that understanding of being able to observe emotion, having the habit, the muscle memory of being able to observe emotion and to allow it without interfering or intellectualizing, is a powerful tool to take into the psychedelic experience. It's that I think allowed me to have the level of growth and real improvement in my experience of life that I have is those things together. Had I come to it just from cognitive therapy background, I don't know that I would have had the same experience of it.
Yeah, so you're speaking about your presence or mindfulness practice, right? Like, and how that kind of affected and what you what what you're able to bring into the psychedelic experience through that.
There's the mindfulness. Well, I was speaking specifically of what I got from Haikomi. And from
Okay.
Haikomi, I got the ability to really observe and allow emotions. Before, emotions just used to be what I am. I am angry and I am this. And I didn't know that it's being held in a specific place and that I could feel into that and see it and understand it without it being all consuming, without it defining me in that moment. And that ability to observe like a scientist looking through a microscope is a really powerful tool to develop. And having that in your muscle memory is a really useful skill to bring into the psychedelic experience, because then it starts happening all on its own. You can say, oh God, I really feel this sadness and it's down here by my hip, and you can breathe into it and you can allow it, and all of a sudden that releases, and then there's the energetic release around it, and that's how things get to move.
Yeah. Such a difference between I am angry and I feel anger somewhere in my
It's
body,
all the difference.
or any emotion, right?
Yeah, it's all the difference.
I wanted to make sure I asked you just to share a little bit about a particular part of the book that I really enjoyed, which was this idea of a canary, and sort of coming, falling out of the insights or progress that we've made. I think the way you put it in the book is how to keep your gains. So what can you expand a little bit on that idea of the canaries?
Sure. So, I was talking about integration. So, integration is the time after a big psychedelic experience, or even after a big breathwork experience. I've had really powerful releases in breathwork too. But you can come out of those experiences feeling like you're at a new level, like you've let stuff go, like you've moved beyond. And that's a very common thing to go through, especially when you're new. But then there's this thing that happens. It's an expansion and contraction. So you've expanded out, you've relaxed, and almost always there's a contraction after, where the old feelings come back, the stuff comes back, and there's an expansion and contractions kind of happen over and over again, and they just get they're biggest at first, and then they just get a little smaller and a little smaller, and then you'll kind of settle into where the real changes are, what's really happened. And for me, navigating, I used to be a very, very angry person. I would be easily triggered. And for me, I would feel this relief from the anger, and then something would happen and the anger would come back. And I'd feel like I'd had a real powerful sense of loss. But if I had paid attention, I would have seen that there were things leading up to the anger, like my body was starting to get more tense. There were indicators. And so I came up with this idea of canaries in a coal mine. And back in the old days, miners would take canaries down with them, because canaries have very sensitive respiratory systems. And if the air quality got bad, unfortunately, the canary would die. But if the miners saw that their canaries were dead, they would get out of the mine, because they would know that, maybe carbon dioxide was building up, or, whatever down there that would be dangerous for them. And so it was just an indicator of something that was coming. And so this idea that you can lay out canaries in your life as you see positive changes happen, and if you see your metaphorical canary feet up in the cage, you know that, oh, I should do something to help myself. Because, for me, depression was a big one. And so one of the things that came out of my medicine work was keeping my home much neater than I had previously. It wasn't something I felt I was supposed to do. It's just something I wanted. And a big one there was making my bed every morning. So if I get out of bed in the morning and I ever have this feeling like, I don't want to make it, that's a canary that's dead in a cage for me, because that says, oh, maybe depression's trying to creep in a little bit here. And another one would be, do I want to exercise, or do I want to practice music? Practicing music is just the love of my life, right? And If I start feeling like those aren't things I want to do, those are canaries that have been affected by something that's been moving in the background that I wasn't aware of. So instead of depression just kind of avalanching on me and sneaking up on me and getting trapped in it, all of a sudden I realize, oh, these things are happening. I should probably get a little exercise or maybe talk to somebody, do something to help bring me back where I was. And that's the whole idea with canaries, is you find these milestones that you don't want to cross back into. Oh man, I'm really letting the dishes pile up in the sink again. Haven't done that in a long time. Why am I allowing that to happen? It's just feeling a little overwhelming. It's feeling this, it's feeling that. And then you find what you need to do to bring yourself back and reset those canaries again for you.
Can you expand a little bit on maybe your personal sort of practices that help you with those canaries? And are your sort of practices that you're doing on a daily or weekly regular basis different when you're preparing or after a big psychedelic experience, or is it just kind of a sort of suite that you've developed for yourself?
That all started back with my first book, Present Moment Awareness. And that book is just a really simple guide to self-awareness for somebody that's maybe uninitiated. It's meant to be very, very simple. It's meant to lay things out in a really simple way. And I just re-released that for its 20th anniversary when I released Coming Full Circle, which, boy, that'll give you a sense of having aged, re-releasing a book from 20 years before. But my daily practice is still very similar to what I wrote about in that book, in that I try to stay aware. If I feel, there's mindfulness where I'm aware of my environment, and I'm really checking in and just trying not to be up in my head so much, that kind of thing. But then there's awareness of how is my body interpreting what's happening in the life around me, and what feelings are coming up, and what thoughts does that trigger? And that's what I try to stay really aware of. So my daily practice is being mindful of what kind of thoughts I'm having, being mindful of what kind of feelings I'm having. And if I notice something that seems a little out of whack, I'll just back up a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I see these things happening. I can feel my body tensing. I'm getting a little sad, or I'm getting a little upset. Why? What's happening there? And what part of me is feeling vulnerable, and that it has to have this kind of response? And that I do throughout the day, every day, just trying to stay mindfully aware.
Awesome. Where do you see the sort of psychedelic quote unquote renaissance going in the next few years? And do you think that underground that you mentioned earlier will ever kind of integrate with the industry and the things that are happening on a more sort of mainstream legal basis?
Where do I see it going? I see opportunities for people to try psychedelic experiences, even if it's just a casual experience. I mean, people can get massive benefit from that. The shift in perspective. My God, if we could get Donald Trump to take some MDMA, just think what would happen to the world, right? Sorry, I usually don't talk politics. or Biden, for that matter. Any of these politicians that are so stuck in their ways, if they could have these experiences of greater self-awareness, how would that ripple to effects being changed in the world? And frustratingly, I know facilitators that have worked with politicians and can't, of course, talk about it, but then those politicians go back and don't vote to legalize things, and it's just like hypocrites. So the psychedelic renaissance is going hand in hand with the psychedelic gold rush, and there's all sorts of businesses popping up. The take-home ketamine model, which I think is criminal, is getting big. And so as money gets involved, everything gets dumbed down. So it gets more and more cheerleaded that, oh, this is a quick fix. Get 30 years of psychotherapy in one afternoon on mushrooms, that kind of nonsense. Right. That's more of the kind of thing I try to dispel in Coming Full Circle. So everything gets dumbed down to reach into people's wallets faster and more frequently. Things like take-home ketamine, where you talk to somebody over Zoom while you take ketamine. That's reckless and irresponsible on a level that I think is criminal. And the fact that ketamine can be used as a powerful medicine for self-evaluation and change, but not in small doses and not going into a clinic. They call them pump and dump clinics. You go in and you get an IV and you leave. That's more symptom management. It gives some people symptom relief from their depression, but it doesn't do anything to help heal the underlying causes. It's using the ketamine like a antidepressant. Here's this medicine you take, and for a while you feel better, which is the direct opposite of the direction of doing deep medicine work, where you're actually going into the discomfort to help it to heal. So there's a lot of abuse, there's a lot of dumbing down, there's a lot of misinformation that's coming out of the Renaissance, coming out of the, once somebody's got a financial interest, they stop looking at information that should suggest that maybe this isn't what they should be doing, that this really isn't helping people. Now, working with ketamine in low to moderate doses in a therapeutic setting, that could be really helpful. That's actually something that could really be helpful, but you need the support of someone there so you can feel safe to let things go. In the psychedelic renaissance, there's a number of training facilities popping up, training guides, which they're really just training trip sitters, but they're telling these people that they can sit with people with trauma, they can sit with people processing heavy emotions, they can sit with veterans, and they can't. Well, I mean, they can, but they're not going to help. And the Renaissance is bringing all these people out of the woodwork to do this, because there's no checks and balances to show them how much they don't know and how much they need to learn. And so you're getting a lot of really unqualified people offering this kind of support. On the positive side, it's bringing psychedelics out of that old war on drugs propaganda and framing it in a new light for a lot of people. So it's going to open the opportunity for them to maybe explore and learn. And so for that, it's positive. Where is it going to go? I think, like most things that get wrapped up into the mainstream, it's just going to continue to get dumbed down in a lot of ways. And the real help's going to stay in the legally sanctioned clinical trials, where there's at least people that understand what's happening. And it's going to stay in the underground, but with the qualified guides. And it's going to be up to the consumer to be educated enough to tell the difference. Ultimately, I think there's going to be a lot of people that get helped by it, and there's going to be a lot of people that get hurt by it.
Yeah, lots of different sort of aspects to that, and I agree with you that the two sort of streams of the underground and the legalized path, where a lot of money and different interests are getting involved, don't necessarily have to converge. But at the same time, there are going to be people that would have never, took a chance or considered that this could be healing in the first place until it was legalized. I had a conversation not too long ago with my dad where he, he lives in LA, and he said, yeah, there was this article in the LA Weekly. Have you heard of this guy, and I'm like, Paul Stamets? Yeah. And he, would have never asked me about that or considered that, psilocybin could be helpful to him until, it was in this newspaper, and, they were talking about it kind of coming out of the underground. And he said, well, it said in the article that this is really good for memory and for, staving off Alzheimer's. And, I'm not getting any younger. So, that's interesting to me. And I just thought, wow, that's really interesting. Things that you never would have thought you were talking about with your dad. Right.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's definitely, positives and negatives to what's happening. And just like you, I went to the psychedelic science conference earlier, or I guess it was last year now. But I was really surprised by the amount of people that I met there, because I went for a company that was doing integration circles and integration events. And so as people would come up to the booth, I would say, have you had any experiences lately that you're integrating, or do you have like a ceremony or a trip coming up that you're preparing for? And I was really shocked by the amount of people that said, no, I've never had any sort of psychedelic experience. I'm just curious. Or my clients are asking about this. So, I want to get involved. And it was like kind of mind boggling to me, because first of all, those tickets to that conference were not cheap in any stretch or any reference. And, but to me, the being able to do my own work and having those experiences is one of the most important things about being able to hold space for others. And so the lack of experience there was very, kind of eye-opening and a little concerning, to be honest.
I heard that there was also a very party vibe to people who were running around giving out vape pens of 5-MeO DMT, and there were mushroom chocolate bars being people were there.
Oh man,
treating it like Burning
apparently
Man.
Apparently I was hanging out in the wrong areas then.
there was a lot of exuberance around, and I can understand the excitement around the idea of psychedelics, not being criminally punished. But that's a very different thing from helping somebody to heal from PTSD, helping a veteran to get their life back. You're not running around going, woo, it's like,
Right.
that's a serious topic that needs to be held in a serious way, for those
Yeah.
people to get the kind of help that they really need. And, teasing apart the Burning Man crew who are excited that psychedelics are going to hopefully be more easily accessible and without the legal risks, which I sit on that side. I'd love to see them more available, but I also would love to see some real education going around so people understand, okay, if I get into a bad trip zone, if I get into a challenging situation, what do I need to do? How do I handle it? So they don't end up causing problems for themselves and others, that kind of thing. There needs to be some education and understanding with it as it comes around.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna have to ask some people that I went with about that, because this is the first time I'm hearing about it. But yeah, it's I could definitely see it, and it was kind of an interesting experience in that there were so many different types of people mixing together. There was one moment that sticks out to me as I literally stopped in my tracks and just started laughing because it was so surreal. I was walking down this hall, and I spent 10 years in corporate finance, so I'm familiar with a different part of the world, and somebody was using the term EBITDA, which is a very like business minded term, and psilocybin in the same sentence. And I've like never in my life would I have thought that like that those two words could be used in the same context together. It just made me laugh. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting melting pot of
Yeah.
people. um, so as a way to kind of close, the name of the podcast is The Vital Point, and there's a big long story that I could tell you about where that came from. But just to summarize down, for me, the vital point is that regardless of the methods that you're using for your transformation, that you have to practice them. It's not enough just to listen to a podcast, or just take some mushrooms or something like that and expect that all the work's going to be done for you. Is there anything in your work or in your just experience that feels alive at the moment, that you could share as your vital point?
That's a really good question. Sorry, I'm usually not at a loss for words. So through the psychedelic healing work, like you were saying, a lot of people get the idea that, oh, I had this powerful experience and it's just going to stick now. And so being mindful of your integration. And, and especially with deep medicine work, the mindful integration is less about cognitive understanding and more about keep allowing that openness that you fostered, and allowing the movement of the emotions that started to move in this session, to keep allowing them to move. It's this process of allowing and not stifling, and that is part of the practice, being open and more fluid and less rigid internally. And that I think is a vital point for doing any kind of work with psychedelics and in the healing process.
Yeah, I love that. I think it speaks to, at least in my experience, that sometimes that integration process can be really sort of sometimes delayed, or like it comes in different chapters. It might something that you feel like, oh, I integrated this, or I'm not thinking about it anymore, might come up later on, months or even years later, and you're seeing it from a different perspective, or you're getting fresh insights or fresh experiences from it. It's not just a linear like A to B.
And not flipping a switch.
Here's my integration session, and now we're done with it. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So coming full circle, available wherever you get books, right? You can get it on Amazon, different retailers.
Yeah, it's Amazon. It's got an audiobook and an ebook and and of course print book.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for coming on The Vital Point and sharing your experience. And, thank you for writing this book. I think it's a very timely book for people, especially as these medicines start to come out more and this so-called renaissance is just really getting underway. It's really important for people to have good, solid information to go off of, so that they're not hopefully led astray by, maybe some of these social media quote unquote gurus that we were talking about, or people that are charismatic, or just, people that are curious and experimenting and not understanding like the transformational power of some of these medicines.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. I sincerely hope you found value and inspiration in this episode. If it struck a chord with you, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave me a review. It's a simple, cost-free way to show support and help more like-minded people discover the show. Also, make sure you sign up for my newsletter at bluemagicalchemy.com to be the first to get updates, exclusive content, and insights delivered straight to your inbox. Remember, it's not about the method you choose or the pace at which you travel. The vital point is to consistently show up for yourself and practice. As the saying goes, it's not the destination, but the journey that truly matters, and I'd be honored to accompany you on yours. So don't hesitate to reach out, connect, share your journey, the successes and the challenges alike. I'm just an email, DM, or review away. Let's journey, grow, and transform together. Thanks again for tuning in. Until the next episode, keep exploring, keep growing, and above all, keep practicing, because that's the vital point.